Positioning your boat once you find those fish is probably one of the biggest things you can do correct. And whether it's triangulating with trees or using the line extension on your graphs, like I always keep my front line extension on my Humminbird Helix on my mapping to show me exactly which way I'm pointing. And sometimes if I mark them and put a waypoint down, I'll back up a little bit further so I can go straight out and look at my Humminbird Helix, see where that track extension is, and I say, okay, I'm right on that waypoint. It's right there at, that oak tree right there, or just right there in general in front of me. And I'm going to make that first initial cast right where I know to. I have my proximity flags on that'll tell me I'm 80 foot from it, 100 foot from it. So I know I'm going to hit it every time that first cast. And then boom, I can turn the boat a little bit, spot lock. I've got my angle right there. I can keep casting there repetitively, maybe fan cast just a little bit. If I get bit, cool. Keep catching them. If I don't get bit, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to change my angle. That's my next one on this. Not just your boat position, but your angle. Those fish still might be there on that little shell bar or that hump or that roadbed or that bridge. Well, guess what? If I'm throwing a big crankbait at that first angle and I don't get bit, and I'm bringing it downhill, say I'm bringing it downhill on a big point, don't get bit, a lot of times I've seen it before, okay, I'll switch around. I'm not going to drive straight over them with my trolling motor. I'm going to go around, do the same thing I did. I'm going to get on the backside, so I want to bring it uphill this time. Let's try bringing it right in their face. I want that crankbait grinding this time. So I'll go all the way around, do the same thing. Point that extension track right at them, get, right there in that 80 to 110 foot away from that waypoint. And boom, make that same cast, spot lock that old Trex, grind it down there first cast, bam. Okay, I caught one. It's the angle. I had to change my angle. And a lot of times it'll be just, you might pull them toward you. Say I pull up that first time, bringing it, downhill, and I catch 2 or 3, and then I don't catch anything. I probably pulled them to the boat a little bit. A lot of times you'll see them on your 2D underneath you, or you might see one come up with another fish, and you pulled that school a little bit, and it either busted them up, or they're close to you. So just making that different angle position change with your boat is huge. Whether those fish pushed or pulled, they might have pulled the opposite way because they felt their buddies getting caught, so they scooted over 30 feet. And that's when I'll go through there and get a little different angle. I can see them on my 360 if they moved, and make the right cast. But a lot of it's, you'll come through a little shell bar or a little sweet spot or a brush pile or whatever, just a little bit of a different angle, and show that fish the bait, say they're facing into the current or away from it or whatever, especially with like brush piles offshore, it's like a mat of grass. You never know which way that fish is facing, and the angles are huge when you're offshore, whether it's a pile or a rock pile or what. That's one of the biggest keys, especially when you get a fish or a school of fish going, is just changing your position, changing that angle of the cast, making sure you're hitting them right. And anything can happen. Every bait's different, and you'll kind of learn that some spots, especially if you're fishing on the same lake over and over, man, this spot right here, this point right here that me and John fish, man, it's good with a crankbait, like I said, going uphill, or man, this one's good bringing it downhill. Just stuff like that you'll learn over time is huge, not just on your boat positioning, but on your angles as well. Most of the time, a largemouth bass is going to go straight to the top, and they're going to jump in. It's going to look like they're a mile out there. Well, I see a lot of people just kind of get real slow when they think they're coming up to the top of the water, because they want to see it in their mind, but that's the worst thing they could do. The deal is, you stick that rod down and you're reeling 100 miles an hour, and it's not to bring the fish to you, it's to keep that head from coming up and shaking. It's keeping that head down the best you can. So the biggest thing I would do is just learning how to reel them in correctly when they're coming up, keeping your rod down, and having the right rod and reel set up. I'm throwing it on high-speed reels so I can, pull in a lot of line when I need to. But, just like that Halo HFX 7.6 medium heavy cranking rod I throw on that, it's real parabolic. It's kind of like the action you saw with the top water I threw at Fork, and that just allows those fish to head shake when you're putting that pressure on them to keep them down and not pulling those hooks out. That's a really good question, and a really key deal is to keep those fish on. And it's hard, especially with your big flutter spoons, man. It's hard to keep those fish on. You got to know when to horse them and know when to let them play. But at the same time, the biggest deal is keeping their head down when you can.
And do you use that flutter spoon for a go-to after they're biting the deep cranks or the jigs? Is that like a backup?
It can be. Like I caught the first 3 fish here. You see me boom, boom, boom on Bass Track the first day here. I caught 3 fish, my first 3 casts on a flutter spoon, then never had a bite on it. So every spot's different. A lot of times I'll use it more when we're talking about the hair jigs and the hair scroungers and stuff like that, where they're suspended and just getting a reaction strike out of them. You know, it's different every spot, but I always have one tied on everywhere I go offshore, and I'm always going to test a school. A lot of times you can catch the biggest fish out of a school with that flutter spoon.
Thanks, bud.
Yes, sir. All right, the next question we're going to go to is going to come from Lincoln. Lincoln, I'm going to ask you to unmute and go ahead and add you to the spotlight.
Hey, so you talked about speciating on the graph. How do you do that? And when you found an angle, a casting angle that you like, is that repeatable each of the spots you've graphed that you found that you're going to hit?
What was the first part?
How do you speciate on the graph? Like you said, you get to a point where you can sort of tell whether you're looking at barfish or bass.
I got you. That's just time on the water and trusting your electronics. That's all it is. I wish I had a secret to, and you'll figure it out eventually. You know, I can't just, you know, like usually a good bass is just like taking a Sharpie and going boop, like barely touching the surface of your screen. But it's just time on the water, and it's different everywhere you go with current compared to rock bottom or more wood. You get comfortable, and you know, like I said, don't be afraid to test them. I tested groups here that I knew were carp. I knew they were buffalo and catfish, but I was like, what if that's a giant school of bass, you know? But it was very obvious from the get-go they were too big. And then I had other groups that I was like, you know, especially at Fork, we have a lot of yellow bass, little bitty barfish, and you'll see them and you'll be like, oh man, that looks good. That's 300 of them, but you know in your mind that's a bunch of little yellow bass. But I'll always check them, and you can, you know, feel them pecking on your bait or catch them on a jigging spoon or something. And that just comes just from time on the water, seeing them on your side imaging, on your down imaging, on your 2D, and knowing what they look like.
And the information Bass University provides isn't your basic run-of-the-mill fishing video. This is specific information from A to Z to help you learn, get to the water, and become a better angler quickly.